Welcome to the Table Podcast, where we discuss issues of God and culture. Brought to you by Dallas Theological Seminary.
Welcome to the Table. We discuss issues of God and culture. I'm Darrell Bock, Executive Director at the Hendricks Center. And our topic this morning is millennials. That's the group that came after the baby boomers and the Gen Xers. And we're actually going to discuss statistics that involve a little bit of the Gen Xers and the millennials as well. But our discussion point is to figure out kind of how this group fits into the dynamics of the church. Many people have said it's a different generation from the generations that have preceded it. And so we're going to analyze that a little bit. We're also thinking through a conference that's upcoming for us called Prone to Wander, in which Gabe Lyons is going to be the major guest speaker. So we're glad you could join us this morning. And I'm going to let our guests introduce themselves. Normally I introduce them, but I figured this is a fun group, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And Jay, I'll let you begin.
All right. My name's Jay Sedwick, and I am a professor of educational ministries here at Dallas Theological Seminary, beginning my 18th year on faculty, and I've been working with young people or adolescents for 30 years.
Okay, educational ministries, is that what we call the department?
That's what we call it now. It's called Educational Ministries and Leadership.
Trouble is, when you've been here as long as I have, you know, the department goes through a variety of names, and so by the time I finally decide to retire, the Lord takes me, I'm sure it'll be called something else.
You weren't on the memo, apparently.
That's exactly right. Okay, very good.
I'm Mark Matlock. I'm the Executive Director of Youth Specialties, and we resource youth workers in the church. And I've been working with teenagers and millennials for, 25 years next year. So
well, weren't you a millennial when you started working with millennials? Or?
Yeah, no, I'm squarely in Gen X.
Okay,
so,
all right.
Yeah, I'm an Xer. I'm angry about it.
Oh, really? What are you?
Yeah, I'm very frustrated.
Wish you'd been a millennial, or would you rather been a baby boomer?
Hey, let me tell you, I think I'm very jealous of the millennials.
Okay.
I look at my kids and I'm like going, oh man, I wish I had those opportunities when I was.
Well, let's start there. So, what is it the millennials got going for them that makes it exciting to be a millennial?
Well, one thing is just the size of the generation. Mm-hmm. It's a large generation, mm-hmm. and it's pretty big. And that's one of the things Gen Xers sometimes have a little bit of problem with, is we're this small, tiny little generation sandwiched between two really big generations.
Yeah, you're the tomato in the sandwich, huh?
yeah. And the boomers have held on to their seats of leadership for a little too long, not making space for us.
Okay, I heard that.
And now by the time we're coming into leadership, it's almost already time
to leap over you. Yeah,
it's time to turn it over and pass the baton.
That's why it's called Gen X.
Push you out of the way, man.
Xing them right out of there.
Yeah, so we're just an angry generation. Reality Bites is the movie that defines us. Gen X, but the millennials, I mean, literally, they're living at such a fascinating time on Earth, and I guess every time is a fascinating time on Earth. But there's some really interesting things taking place with technology and globalization that just make the world a very fun place to be right now, and possibilities. And I think about how God created us in the garden to fill the earth and to subdue it and to be co-creators with what he's doing. And I think this generation has more tools to do that with than any generation before them.
And they can thank the baby boomers and the Gen Xers for that, can't they?
Yeah, okay, all right. So, yeah, maybe so. But yeah, I think about that. And not just the ability to create it, but to share it. And so there's a lot of neat things that they have access to. Unfortunately, the institution of the church, if we look at it as an institution as opposed to some of the community life that it really should reflect, I don't think that it's kept pace with where the millennials and their opportunities are. And I think they're kind of bored with the church.
Okay. Well, we will come back to that. That's a suggestive teaser.
Yes, it was. I built that into my intro.
Yeah, that's
something to say.
Yeah.
All right, Jay. So what's your take on all this as you listen to?
Well, what concerns me is the fact that there's a lot of study going on of the millennials, and I'm a little skeptical of the studies. My background in research tells me that there are a lot of hypotheses out there, and there's a lot of things that are being looked at, and yet you got to look at who's studying it, why they're studying it, what they're trying to come up with, what they're trying to push in many ways. You've heard the old adage, there are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics.
And the statistics are at the bottom of that
Exactly. Because you can make a lot of things sound like you want to sound, and there's a lot of things that are being said about millennials that I want to step back and say, all right, where did the study come from? What are they saying about it? Why are they funding this study? What are they trying to push? What books are they trying to sell? What conferences are they trying to populate with people?
Oh, my goodness.
And all those kinds of things, to say, is what they're saying really accurate? And a lot of times those headlines are what they're really driving. They want to get a headline, they want to get attention, they want to stir people up, they want to get people excited. And then if you really dig in and look at things, you say, you know what, there's really not a whole lot there, but they're still making a big deal out of it. Interesting.
Well, where I want to begin, since you discuss the issue of opportunities, is kind of discuss where we are sociologically with this age group and the group that is just above it in terms of age. And the book that I'm going to draw on here is a book by Robert Wuthra, who is a sociologist at Princeton, and he wrote a book called After the Baby Boomers, looking at this generation. Now, this book is just short of 10 years old, but it's interesting in the factors that he says have shaped the millennials, and he goes through 7 of these. Now, some of these we've discussed before in our earlier podcasts, but I think it's an interesting list, and I think it raises interesting questions. And Mark, when you say the church hasn't kept up with this generation, part of what they're not keeping up with are these demographical features that have formed and shaped people that then the church has to cope with. So here we go. The first one is called delayed marriage. Now, you put that phrase together and you go, what in the world is a delayed marriage? Yeah. But the point is, I think, that generally speaking, this generation is getting married later. Yes. That from the time someone leaves home from high school to go to college or whatever it is they're going to do, till the time they become married and establish a family, has stretched out over the last generation significantly. Somewhere, interestingly enough, between 7 to 10 years, I think is where this is falling, depending on which part of the group you're looking at.
That's accurate.
Just to be autobiographical for a second, my son, who's 31, is very much a reflection of this. I look back at my life, and when I started dating, thinking about having a family, etc., I was married at 22. He's 31. He is just beginning his first significant relationship at 31. I mean, that's, as a dad, I was going, what in the world's going on here? Anyway, so you've got that kind of delay. And
that's very common.
Very, very common.
And it's a huge shift.
Yeah, and we're going to see there are other factors that are playing into why this is happening, like the way in which the economics of being a young person and going to college and debt and what that means for students and that kind of thing. So there are a lot of factors that are in play here, but the fact is that's happening, and that's creating a gap for the church that we have talked about before, which is, it used to be the pattern was, one of the other statistics that's in here is a couple is more likely to go to church than single people are, generally speaking, and it's 2 to 1 female to male as well. And so what that means is, it used to be you might drop out from being involved in the church, but you'd get married relatively young, you'd have your kids, and you'd go, how are we going to raise our kids? And you go back to the church to have the church help. But now the adult pattern has become so established that when they get married and have their kids, they're not asking that question quite so much anymore, and so they're not coming back in the numbers that they were. So that's one of the factors. So obviously delayed marriage is an important part of this picture.
Yes, and it's it's significant in a lot of ways, because what it really does, it allows an individual to create, to accept different scripts that go outside of the norms of society. Even with sexuality, Bob Priest, a missiologist, anthropologist, he was talking about the fact that in the United States, because we have such a long time from puberty to to marriage, especially now with it getting longer, that we have more opportunities to explore different sexual scripts rather than the ones that are proposed by society, which is why when you go and look at the sexual expression of other cultures, you'll see not as much variation as you do in the United States because of these different factors. Anthropologists are studying sexuality in really interesting ways right now. And it's kind of fascinating what they're learning about how that's expressed in different cultures, how much is genetic, whatever. But that distance away from home is affecting church attendance. It's allowing for a different set of values and mindsets to emerge.
Yeah, and you put that alongside what actually comes out of the 60s and the sexual revolution, the arrival of the pill, the choices that people have. So you're getting more partners, you're getting more people living together. Living together without being married is not nearly as unusual as it used to be. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it's significant.
It's pretty staggering.
Yeah,
you know, the amount of cohabitation that's happening. Yeah.
So this is a very, very common thing that's going on.
And the research is showing that cohabitation doesn't actually help marriages.
Exactly right.
You know, that marriages where there's cohabitation before typically don't work out. Now that could change over time as, you know, a new frames emerge, but it's
interesting. I was in Canada a couple of weeks ago, and we were looking at a variety of things dealing with the same-sex decision. In the midst of it, I happened to call up an article from the New York Times that wasn't about same-sex, but it was about cohabitation, written by a counselor, and basically it was a counselor saying, and this was a secular counselor saying, this is what I tell couples who live together who think that because they live together they're better prepared for marriage. And basically she said the statistics are that's not the result. And so particularly to female counselees that she had, she's saying, don't fall into that trap, basically, is what she was saying. And it was an interesting article because, I mean, this is the New York Times. This is not the Southern Baptist press that we're talking about.
Right.
And so it just fascinating. In fact, it was so fascinating, I took my iPad, handed it over to my wife, and said, "Hey, take a look at this. This is an interesting article." Yeah. What do you notice about delayed marriage?
Well, we haven't kind of put a number on it yet, but studies, and here I am going to quote statistic after what I opened with.
You are educated.
Here we go, Jay. Here we go.
But if you average out the numbers, and the studies are saying the average age for first marriage is around 27 years old, and that is a lot later than it used to be. And you've already identified a number of the factors. I think one of the biggest factors we've kind of talked a little bit about is economics. It is such a consumer-oriented country in the Western world, and we are trying very much to get ahead, to get a little bit more, to be stable, and people make decisions based on I'm not going to get married because I don't have enough money to make this work. How are we going to support one another?
Very much where my son is.
It's a big
they're
big
graduating with lots of college debt.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
We have more people going to college. More millennials are going to college than ever, but they're not being able to pay for it.
Right.
I mean, couples that I'm doing marriage counseling with right now, before they get married, a lot of them are starting off $100,000 to $200,000 in debt as a couple.
Yeah,
which is staggering, and that weight around their neck. What kind of a profession are you going to go into other than a medical doctor or maybe an attorney or something like that can really make a significant income to pay off some of that debt? I think we're saddled with that for a very, very long time. And then, one of the main reasons for being married in the past has been to start a family and to have children, and we've delayed that process. And one of
that's
the problems,
where we're coming to next.
Yeah, one of the problems that we talked about in the past is the fact that children are no longer viewed as an asset. Children are viewed as a liability. Where in the past it was how many children can you have? The more you have, the more productive and the more favorable your family would be in the culture and in the society and in terms of your livelihood. But today there's negotiations going on. How many children are we going to have? How many can we afford? Diapers are expensive, and all the things. And that's a reality that
in my premarital counseling, a lot of couples when I talk to about family, they're saying we don't want to have any kids.
It's this is actually
they've agreed on that.
This is the second factor that's on the list, so we might as well go there. It says fewer and later children, on average 6 years later to have the first child versus 1959, a birth rate that's half of what it was in 1910. Only half half of men in their 30s live in a home with a child of their own. I mean, those are amazing statistics. So fewer children, later children. And here's another thing, you know, how we live our lives does impact what we do. And so, you know, years ago, you basically had family businesses in most cases, or something like that. So, so, you know, the father would pass on the business to the son, if you were thinking, or the skill to the son, et cetera. And so the more children you had, you were actually contributing to the human resources part of your operation, if I can say it that way. Yeah. Well, with all the choices, you said possibilities. With all the choices that we have, children don't necessarily decide to do what their parents do. In fact, that's probably more unusual now. And because of all the choices, you don't have that factor in play. Plus, another factor that we're going to get to is you've got both parents working, in part because the debt issue that creates that need, plus the freedom to be able to do it.
And the desire to have more.
And the desire to have more. All those things are playing in there. So that strains the ability to raise a child for a lot of people in their thinking. They think they lose their freedom when they get their children, which, I mean, who can argue with that? There's a certain truth to that. So, you know, so there are all these factors in play. And so millennials are really dealing with a whole nother way of living, if I can say it that way, than generally has happened before. And we're still going through the adjustments periods on some of that. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're finding?
Oh, I think so. I think, you know, think about everything that's been disrupted, the financial industry. So the ability to even launch a business, you know what I mean? It's like mom and dad are becoming the venture capitalists. You know, we have things like Kickstarter. And, you know, I was just talking to a guy who works with a lot of young startup type of groups. He's a bit of a venture capitalist. And he said, everybody has all these millennials have this positive energy about what they want to do, and they believe they can do just about anything, but they're scared out of their minds because they don't really know how they're going to make it happen. And there's the reality that maybe nobody likes or responds to what you do. So it is interesting. You know, you have disruptions in publishing, in music, in government. I mean, literally every aspect of life has been disrupted, a lot of it by technology. And so we are kind of trying to feel our way out, you know, with this generation. For instance, a lot of millennials. In fact, Barna Research did a little series of frame books, and one of them was on 20-somethings. And 82% of them wanted to be married, right? But before they got married, they wanted to do these things. 70% wanted to be fully developed as a person. Okay. 69% wanted to be financially established. 60% thought that they should live together with somebody. But 3 out of every 10 millennials said that they weren't convinced that conventional marriage was the way to go. And that's their reflection, I believe, on looking at their parents and their grandparents and going, did this work? Did this play itself out? And they're wanting a better life.
Yeah, that fully developed thing is really interesting, as if you can enter marriage as a perfect person married to a perfect person.
Which you're never completely fully developed regardless.
Exactly right.
It's all a growth process.
So let's bring in a couple of other factors, because we've raised them, and really we've got to talk about all these together. What Withrow has listed as uncertainties of work and money, dual work families, more financial pressure, consumption debt, work with stress is up because of these demands, fluidity on the job for the young is high. In other words, they're working, but they're moving from place to place. There's not stability in those jobs. They're constantly searching and moving. Here's an interesting set of statistics. There's more parental support for a longer term. And in the group that is between 18 and 34, now remember this is a while back, but I think it's interesting. The average was $38,000 of support from parents for that age group. That's a significant chunk of change.
Yeah, it is.
And it shows you the pressure that's on that. This group is independent, but in some senses they're not independent. They're still quite dependent at the same time.
And we have to ask ourselves, is that a bad thing? You know, in America we have this narrative of independence, which is
individuality.
Individuality. You
Right.
know, and we tell people to pursue your dream and fulfill your passion. But if you look at cultures that are interdependent, where they don't take a job based on whether they're passionate about it, they take it on whether it's good for the community for them to do it, which is why I think that we see a lot of non-white and immigrant peoples in the United States pursuing these technology jobs and things. They're taking positions that nobody else is necessarily working hard for. And it's kind of an interesting thing because they're not things that they're passionate about, but they're things that they're willing to work for because there's an opportunity there. I'm looking at career counseling today with teenagers, and nobody's asking them what are the careers that you can make a living in. What they're being told is, what does your heart tell you want to do?
Yeah.
And that's just a different way of thinking.
Right.
And so maybe because I know with my children who are definitely in the millennial category, I have a completely different relationship with them than I did with my parents, which is still a very close relationship. But there is definitely much more interdependence, and even as a parent, I act differently as a parent with them than I do than my dad and mom acted with me. And I think a lot of it has to do with this idea that we're a little bit different family unit. There's a little different community going on there. And I probably will be more supportive of them and helping them launch their, we're already talking about those things, entrepreneurially, what are the things that they're going to be involved in?
But there's a conflict that I see, though, in terms of the industry. We have, at the risk of sounding a little bit conspiratorial, we have the larger corporations in our country and in our world that really do pull an awful lot of strings, and they are pushing STEM. You've got to get science, technology, engineering, and math. You've got to go do STEM degrees, and even in Washington, they're bemoaning the fact that we're not turning out enough people in those fields, and these high-tech jobs are going unfulfilled or unfilled, and yet on the other side, we're asking students, what do you want to be? What does your heart tell you? But the marketplace is saying, I don't care what your heart tells you. We need you to be an engineer. We need you to be, we need these particular skills. And it's driven so much by the economy. It's driven by the economies and the things that these larger corporations and the pursuit of the future and innovation and those kinds of things. And we've got to have people in those positions. So there's a little bit of a tension and a conflict there between, what does my heart tell me? But yet, if I want a job and if I'm going to survive, I've got to go do this.
Yeah, and I think that's what we mentioned earlier, the fluidity of where people move as they move through jobs, particularly when they're young. You don't have the situation that, again, you used to have before where someone would go to college, find a job, and they might be with a company for 10, 15, 20 years.
Right, which is rare these days.
That's right. That's rare. You're moving around and that kind of thing. But I also think some of that is someone starts off and they want to work in their passion. And they start off working in their passion. They realize, I can't earn a living doing this. I'm going to have to think about something else. And maybe they go back to school to complete and adjust their qualifications, that kind of thing. And boom, they're in the cycle. And then you also get the reverse. The person starts off in the job that people told them. They end up being very unsatisfied with where they are, and so they say, I'm scrapping this, and I'm going to do something I really want to do, with all the loss, if I can say it that way, that choice makes for them financially, but they've still got all these other realities around them that they're having to cope with. So it's the opportunities and choices are multiple, but then the moves can sometimes put you in awkward positions in terms of where you are in life.
There's also, I think, an odd and Mark, you've probably seen this too. There's an odd perspective that young people have of the get-rich-quick kind of thing, that I'm going to be an NFL player, I'm going to be in the NBA, or I'm going to be Mark Zuckerberg, or there are a few that pull that off.
Idol,
exactly. And so there's this pursuit of the get rich quick kind of. There's something out there that I can do if I just find that one thing, man. I'm set. I'm gonna instead of the. Let's just dig in and do the work.
We're gonna have to slog through life.
Exactly. But we watch on TV and we see these people who have made it, and I want that. I want to be that. I want and it's just not realistic. And
or maybe it is.
For a very few.
I mean, but
that's the problem.
But that's the thing is, there are the Zuckerbergs, and those people that hit it huge, but you don't always have to hit it that big.
Correct.
Right? You could hit it, man, I would take a 10th, right?
That's true. That's true.
So to hit it on a smaller level,
yeah.
And I think that's what's interesting is that we have, and this is why go back to the envy of the millennial generation, they are a generation of entrepreneurs. They're looking for opportunities, but they also are they have more simple ideas of life. And it'll be interesting to see what actually happens over the long term, because we know that boomers started out, flower children and peace, love, all this kind of stuff.
And tie-dye shirts.
Yes, and tie-dye shirts. And then all of a sudden they got super corporate, right? And let's
reality
take charge and let's do this. And it'll be interesting to see if this generation doesn't maybe live more into the fulfilled vision of their baby boomer grandparents, where they say, you know what, living more simply and not having to live with as much material wealth is actually a better way to go. I don't need that much. It'll be interesting to see if they do that. Community is more important. Experience is more important. I want to have a place to go. The other trend that we're seeing in the urban context is what they call the ghettoification of the suburbs, where wealth is moving into the cities and pushing poverty out. And so we
look at Dallas.
And
it's amazing what's happening in Dallas.
Yeah, and Dallas is just one of a cajillion cities where that's happening. And so what that does, it creates new ways of people interacting and connecting with one another.
That's right.
And a new way of living, and saying it's important for me to rub shoulders against people that I don't know, because things happen, right? Synapses happen between people, and opportunities are created. So this is a very interesting time.
Well, let me get through the rest of the list and put them all on the table, because I think that what we're seeing is this is all interacting. Higher education. Now, this is stated this way: higher education for some. College education with graduation, especially for women, is up significantly, but still only 25% of the population as a whole graduates. So that's an interesting combination of
and those
things.
who don't are Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark
The ones that hit it big.
Don't even go there.
Yeah.
Don't even go there. Okay. Yeah, we can keep dealing with the exceptions that are the rule for the exceptions.
Right,
anyway,
and then Conan O'Brien in his graduation speech, I think it was, I can't remember where it was, MIT maybe, but he said congratulations for accomplishing what 90% of your generation has accomplished.
Yeah.
You're not a dropout like, and it was really funny, but it was very poignant. In terms of capturing the spirit of the times.
Which reminds me of an introduction I heard from Lou Holtz that he gave this year at a school, I think it was in West Virginia. It goes something like, "Hi, I'm Lou Holtz. I'm 79 years old. I've been 21 before, and you've never been 79. And that's he began to share his wisdom. Anyway, only Lou Holtz could do something like that.
Thanks for listening to the Table Podcast. Join us next week for part 2. For more podcasts like this one, visit dts.edu/the table. Dallas Theological Seminary. Teach truth, love well.